Lesson 3, Shared Resources Overview of ESXi. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to meet the following objectives. Describe the ESXi host architecture, navigate the Direct Console user interface to configure an ESXi host, use the new VMware host client to administer an ESXi host, configure your ESXi host settings, and discuss user account best practices. An ESXi host has the following availabilities and features. They're available for purchase with vSphere as free downloadable version, or you can purchase a licensed version of vSphere. ESXi can be installed on a hard disk, such as a hard drive, SSD, USB device, SD card, and can also be installed on diskless host directly into the memory with your vSphere Auto Deploy. ESXi has high security. It's a host-based firewall, memory hardening, kernel module integrity, TPM, which is this right here, TPM, trusted platform module, UEFI secure boot, and lockdown modes. It has a very small footprint as far as the disk size, and as we said previously, you can install it on hard disks, SAN LUNs, USB devices, SD cards, SATA SSD, and your diskless host, such as your memory. So what is a host-based firewall? Host-based firewalls minimizes the risk of an attack through a management interface. And with that being said, ESXi includes a firewall between the management interface and the network. Memory hardening. This is where the ESXi kernel, user mode applications, and any executable component, such as the drivers and libraries, are located at random in a non-predictable memory space or address. These are combined with non-executable memory protections that are made available by microprocessors, and also provides protection that makes it difficult for malicious code to use memory exploits to take advantage of any vulnerabilities out there. Kernel module integrity. That is a digital signature that includes integrity and authenticity of modules, the drivers, and the applications that are associated or loaded by the VMware kernel. The TPM, Trusted Platform Module, is basically a hardware element that creates a trusted platform that affirms that the boot process and all the drivers loaded are the correct drivers, and they are genuine/real, the real drivers. The UEFI Secure Boot. That's enabled for file systems to support the UEFI Secure Boot firmware that contains a digital certificate that the VMware infrastructure, or the VIBs, chain to it. At the boot time, they verify, once the verify is started before the processes, and then it will check the VIB chain to basically certify in the firmware. Lockdown mode. The lockdown mode is a feature that disables login and API functions from being executed directly on an ESXi host. So if I want to put the ESXi host in lockdown, I could not log in because it disables the logins for external users, and it would lock any API calls that I have going directly to that host. But it's important to know before 6.0, only one lockdown mode existed. Okay, now you have a couple, or a few. Let's look at your physical and virtual architecture. An ESXi hypervisor provides a virtualization layer that abstracts the processor, memory, storage, and networking resources of the physical host and allocates them to multiple virtual machines. ESXi, it's bare metal. It's a bare metal hypervisor that creates basically an automation of a data center or automates a data center. In the ESXi architecture, applications are running in virtual machine CPU, memory, disk, and your network interfaces without direct access to the underlying hardware. So what it's saying right there, if this is your underlying hardware, it doesn't have access to it. Okay? The ESXi hypervisor, which we've seen in previous slides, always remember that is called the VM kernel. What is the responsibility of the VM kernel? The VM kernel receives requests from virtual machines for resources. So it basically calls to use those resources and says, okay, I'm calling for the resource from the virtual machine or the VMM, the virtual machine monitor. And when it does that, the VM kernel basically presents the request to the physical hardware. So you see right here you had the VM kernel is presenting the request to the hardware utilized. And then each powered on VM then has its own dedicated VMM or your virtual machine monitor responsible for presenting or saying, okay, I'm going to give you back, my VMM is going to give me back to this VM1, VM2, VM3, VM4, VM5. So what that's doing is it's calling and saying, okay, my VMM file, virtual machine monitor file, saying, okay, I need memory. I need CPU on 3. I need storage on 2. So just remember, it's making the calls for that. And it's then receiving, or basically it's making the call. Once it makes the call, each powered on virtual machine presents the hardware through the VMM, then the virtual machine, and then receives the request. Once that's done, the ESXi host can then be accessed through several interfaces through what you see here. You got your vSphere client, your HTML5, your command line. You do it by API, and basically your vSphere management, your SDK. Configuring in ESXi host, the direct console user interface. It's a text-based user interface with only keyboard interaction. You cannot use your mouse. Okay. Once you get logged in, this is the first screen you'll see. If you're using 6.5, you're going to see VMware ESX 6.5. Then you're going to see your build number. You're going to see your CPU, your memory. It's going to tell you where you can go and download VMware tools to manage this host. Here it shows an IP address. Remember, it only uses your keyboard. You want to select F2 to customize the system view logs, or F12 to shut down and restart. It's a low-level configuration and management interface, and it's accessible through the console of the server, basically where the host resides, and only used for initial base configuration. What about root access? The direct console enables administrator to configure root access settings by setting a root password, which allows complex passwords only. You can enable or disable lockdown mode. What does that do? It limits management of the host to the vCenter server and enabled only for hosts managed by vCenter server. So with that being said, as you see right here in the slide, you configure your password and your lockdown mode. The administrative username for the ESXi host is root. Root. Let me say that again. The username for the ESXi host is root. And by default, the administrative password is not set. So there is no administrative password preset on this. If you do not set a root password, the root user is allowed, or anybody that goes to that computer and knows this root username will have access to log into your ESXi host at any given time. So if you have a server room where the door stays unlocked and you have this host up and running and you have it up and they click log in because they know root, they've messed with VMware a little bit or had some configurations, that's where you're going to have a problem. Make sure you put a password in them. Once you do this, configure password, it tells you to prevent unauthorized access to this system, set a password for the user. Management network. Within the management network, you can create your host name. You can give it your IP address. There's your IPv6. Or you can view and modify the host management network settings in detail by giving it your DNS servers. Where do you want it pointed to? Where do you want your DNS to go? What other settings do we have? Well, we can configure a keyboard layout. We can enable troubleshooting services, which is an ESXi shell, SSH, so we can SSH into the host. So by default, SSH is disabled. And it tells you can change the current state of SSH. The ESXi shell. I want to highlight one thing right here about the ESXi shell. The ESXi shell is only used for troubleshooting locally. So you have to be, the only time you would want to use this or can use this is when you want to troubleshoot locally to this host where you got it at. The best practice is to keep troubleshooting services disabled until they're necessary. And an example would be, if you're working with VMware technical support, then you can turn it on. You can allow them to get SSH. You can allow them to do whatever they needed to get into it. Okay? But just know that ESX shell, troubleshooting locally only. We have a couple more options. We have our system logs that we can view. We can view support information or reset system configuration. The reset system configuration is not one that you want to do. This option on this screen enables you to reset the system configuration back to default, meaning everything that you have customized within this, if you reset it here, it's going to set it back to default and remove any custom extensions or any package or anything that you've done to that host. So just remember, stay away from reset configuration only as a last resort, only if you're, say, you're getting rid of the device, don't need it no more, you want to clean it up, take it off, whatever you want to do. Just know, if you do that reset system configuration, it's going to take everything back to default. Remote access settings. We talked a little bit ago about ESXi having a firewall as part of a default installation. On your ESXi host, remote clients are typically prevented from accessing services on the host. Local clients are typically prevented from accessing services on remote host. So what do we do about that? To ensure the integrity of the host, few ports are open by default. Anybody remember this one? 9443. We spoke earlier when we was going over to vSphere Web Client. It automatically redirects you to port 9443, right? That's one of them. Few ports are open by default. And what this does, this provided or prevents access to certain services or clients. And in order for that to work, you must modify the properties of the security profile. Now, You can configure the firewall settings for incoming and outgoing connections for a service or a management agent. And for some services, you can manage those service details. An example would be to use the start, stop, or restart buttons to change the status of the service temporarily, or change the startup policy so the service starts with the host or with the port issue. So basically what would happen, say I wanted to, when the host boots up, I want a specific service to start. That's where you'd go set it. And then, another thing to remember, for some services, you can tell it, hey, I only want specific IP addresses from this pool to have connections or have an allowed connection to my host. So when you go to set up your services, think about your security. Think about the ESXi host having a firewall in it. Security, security, security. Secure your device. Change your password. Lockdown mode. To increase the security of your ESXi host, you can put your host in lockdown mode. There's 2 lockdown modes available. I know a while ago we mentioned couple modes, and I say there's multiple modes. Well, I kind of want you to think on it a little bit. There's 2 lockdown modes available now, normal and strict. When you enable normal lockdown mode, let me say this. Lockdown mode forces all operations to be forced through vCenter server, and the host can only be accessed through the vSphere client or the vSphere web client. Okay? When a host is in lockdown mode, no users but the VPX user have authenticated permission, or that permission, they're the only authenticated user that can log in to make changes. Also, users cannot perform operations against the host directly. So when a host is in lockdown, you cannot run commands from the vSphere command line interface, from an administrative server, or from a script. I know we use scripting, and when you go to run that script, you got to put in your destination, your IP, you give it your username, your password, fix your script the way you want it to run, tell it what to do. This would stop that. Couldn't do it. None. Any external software or management tools might not be able to access. So if you got anything external that you use to monitor your ESXi host, when you put it in lockdown mode, just know you're blocking it. And it says right here, if you're using normal mode here, the host is accessible only through local console or vCenter server. So with that being said, I'd have to walk up to the local console, log into it, or go through my vCenter server. Strict mode, the host is accessible only through vCenter server. The direct console UI service is stopped. We talked about the direct console UI service, or the direct console, the DCUI. That's where I would physically walk up to the host, root, username, set my password, type in my password, I have access to it. If you've got this in strict lockdown mode here, it's going to stop that. Then you would have no one being able to walk up to it in the room beside you. Everybody goes to lunch and you got somebody over here that says, hey, I want to walk in there and I just want to look at it. Yeah, if you set it strict mode, guess what? They're not going to be able to get in it. It's forbidden. So let's talk about strict mode a little bit more. Or talk about the differences a little bit. In normal mode, the ESXi host can be accessed through vCenter server, which we just discussed. And only the users are the exempt users on the list, meaning the ones that have permissions can log into it by the DCUI. And if SSH or your ESXi shell are enabled, then they can get access through that too. In strict lockdown mode, the ESXi host can only be accessed through vCenter, and if SSH and the ESXi shell is enabled, The advanced option that the administrator privileges have will remain enabled also. Okay? Once that is logged in, the sessions for the users in the exemption users list that have administrative privileges will remain enabled. If you have a user in here that does not have administrative privileges, they will be immediately terminated. Meaning, if I have a user 1, that is not an admin, no admin, and I have this in strict lockdown mode, user 1 is going to get his access denied. It is going to get terminated on the spot. Now, let's take this back and let's say user 1 has administrative privileges and we have it in this lockdown mode, strict. Well, guess what? User 1 is going to get to keep his connection and his connection will not be terminated. Only users associated with the applications should be added to the exempt users list, meaning only people you trust should always be in that list to have administrative privileges to your ESXi host. Best practices, user accounts. What did I just say? What did we just go over a little bit of? Be careful who you allow access to your ESXi host. Control your root privileges. Create strong root passwords that have at least 8 characters, at least minimal. Use special characters, case changes, numbers, change passwords periodically. Do it every 3 months, every 2 months, every month. Whatever your company policy has you to do, follow that protocol. Manage your ESXi host centrally through the vCenter server system by using the vSphere client, the appropriate vSphere client. And I know I asked you in a previous slot, go in there and look at the vSphere clients. Look at the different ones. Look at different ways you can access it. What way do you like better? What is the appropriate vSphere client to use? Minimize the use of local users on your ESXi host. Add them to AD, Active Directory. Add the relevant administrator uses to the ESX admins domain group. Only people you trust. Who do you trust to access your ESXi environment? Who do you not trust? If local users are created, manage them centrally using the ESXi CLI command and the vSphere CLI. Do research the vSphere CLI. What are the ESX CLI commands to manage your users? ESXi host as an NTP client. NTP. What is NTP? It's a client-server protocol used to synchronize a computer's clock to a time reference. The benefits of synchronizing an ESXi host: performance data can be displayed and interpreted properly. You know what time it happened. What time did something happen? What time did it not happen? Timestamp. What time did it happen? What time did it happen? That's your timestamp within the log message. You want to go audit? You have exactly when it happened, when it didn't happen, when it did not happen. Virtual machines can then synchronize their time with the ESXi host. And it's important to know the NTP client uses UDP port over 123 to communicate with the NTP server. So you have your ESXi host that hosts your NTP client internally, right? It goes out to the cloud here. So we have our cloud. Then you give it the NTP servers to use. NTP is a client-server protocol. When you configure the ESX host to be an NTP client, the host synchronizes its time with the NTP server. So what's happening right here? Same thing. It's going out and it's synchronizing through the cloud to the NTP server. It can then be used, it can be then a server on the internet of your corporate NTP server. Any questions? Go to ntp.org. View which NTP server you want to use here. What NTP server do you want to use? You should now be able to meet the following objectives. Describe the ESXi host architecture. Navigate the direct console user interface, the DSUI, to configure the ESXi host. Use the new VMware host client to administer an ESXi host. Configure ESXi host settings. Security, remember the host settings, root usernames, passwords, and discuss the user account best practices.